My name is Hans Peter Meyer, and today I'm talking with Jack Minard. Jack is the Executive Director of the Comox Valley Land Trust, and this is part of a series of conversations about conservation in the Comox Valley. Good morning, Jack.
Morning, Hans. How are you doing?
I'm good. How long have you been Executive Director of the Land Trust?
I've been Executive Director for just over 4 years now. I've been involved with the Land Trust for about 6.
Okay. What got you involved?
Well, in my work with the Solon River Restoration Society, I had begun by about 2004, 2002 even, to realize that land use and how humans interface with the land is probably the most significant environmental factor in the health of something like the Solon River watershed. Think of that watershed as an ecosystem unto itself, and the land use all through that watershed has a huge impact on it, right from private forest logging right the way through to urban development closer to town.
Right, you lived on the Solon itself, right? I mean, very close to it, right?
Yeah, and I've seen it change over the years. Years ago we used to fish steelhead in there, and now, with the effects of the acid mine drainage from the old mine site, I mean, we're talking about a river that was just devastated. It virtually, well, it was declared dead in 2000 by DFO.
Right. What's the status of it now?
Status now is hopeful.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, still closed for fishing. That's an important piece of information people need to know. We still do see people fishing in the Solon. If you have your fishing license and you're reading the fishing regulations, then you know that there's no fishing in the Solon. However, we still see people fishing in the Solon.
But your focus with the Land Trust is not so much on the Solon River or on water, or is it? I mean, what do you guys do?
It tends to be a bit water-centric. All of my work tends to be a bit water-centric, in that water is the fundamental of all life on this planet. It is, and our bodies are made up of 70% water. If we pollute the water and we make water unusable to us, that's the demise of human beings.
So what's the Land Trust doing? Typically Land Trusts are about acquiring land, but you guys aren't acquiring land, are you?
We're not acquiring land. We're set up to facilitate that process, and we certainly have. We do hold co-covenants with major conservancies and with local jurisdictions, and we'll continue to do that.
So what does a covenant do?
A covenant puts a restriction on a particular piece of property, or a piece of that particular property, a certain value, an ecosystem, a swamp, a creek, some healthy trees, some healthy older growth trees. These are ecosystems that need protection, and this is all voluntary. These covenants are entered into voluntarily by the landowner.
I'm a landowner, and I say I want to put a covenant on this, so even if I don't, whatever happens to me, this chunk of parcel or part of my land will always be like that.
Maybe you had half a dozen Gary oak trees, and you want to make sure those Gary oak trees are never cut down. You put a covenant on that, which is a restrictive piece that goes on to your land title.
So it's not about turning the Comox Valley into a park?
No, it's certainly not. What all the Land Trust is really interested in is protecting, over the long term, those pieces of our landscape that are incredibly essential to human health.
Right. And this is a complicated kind of situation, because I look around and I've been here for pretty close, most of my 51 years, and the valley is still a really beautiful place. It seems really green, all that stuff. But you guys did an inventory of intact watersheds.
Actually, ecosystems.
Okay. Yeah. And when did you do that?
That was compiled from about 2004 through 2008. We began a process of compiling everything, every mapping thing that we could come up with, and putting it all into one place. That had never been done before, and that grew out of the Land Trust's desire to begin to acquire some very critical and important pieces of property throughout the valley. When we began that process of looking at, well, how do we prioritize which pieces of land we want a major conservancy to buy, or looking at that process, we realized very, very quickly as we started to compile this mapping data that it wasn't individual properties that needed to be acquired. It was protection for the existing ecosystems and the interconnections between them. Primarily, those interconnections are provided by the riparian areas. These are the strips of vegetation along the creeks and streams, around wetlands. These are incredibly important in terms of wildlife movement, a healthy biodiversity, so that animals can move and interrelate and interbreed over distance. Without these things, they tend to fail and basically die off.
Well, so what if I don't care about bears and deer?
And that's and rightly so. I mean, a lot of times this is something that I hear an awful lot. Oh, Jack, we don't need all those things. And to an extent, sure, one can look at it that way. However, if you begin to look at what an ecosystem is, how an ecosystem functions, how it forms, and what it does, you begin to see that every single thing on this planet has a niche and a place in this interconnection on the planet.
But why does that affect me living on Willamore Avenue?
Well, I'll give you an example. All I can do is give examples. And examples come in various ways. Mosquitoes is just such a good example. Microorganisms is also a good example. These things are not well understood by people. Microorganisms, at any given moment on your body right now, in a square centimeter, you have 4 million microorganisms. You live in a sheath of microorganisms.
So how does protecting riparian zones protect those guys?
As we learn about these kinds of infinitesimal interconnections between the microorganisms on my body, the air that is around me, and the forest that I'm walking in, that's an interrelationship. And it's an interrelationship we're only just beginning to understand. And up until now, it's all been about exploitation. It's all been about the natural resources that are out there are for profit. Nothing's worth nothing until until a tree's cut down and it's taken to market.
Right.
We're only just now beginning to understand that relationship between the fish and the water and the humans and the microorganisms and the birds and the animals and how they all fit together. Another example I like to use is the relationship between rainfall, the fact that the ocean is salty, and how anadromous fish that live in the ocean and come back to spawn, are the only creatures on the planet that bring some of those nutrients that are washed off the landscape back. These are ecosystems. These are systems that have been forever. These are systems that have set the ability to create a human being. Mm-hmm. Right? Well, as we destroy these, as we take these away, certainly we can mitigate. Certainly we can. I mean, California is a really good example. Most of the creeks and streams are channelized. Many of them are paved and concreted. But California has no water because all the water that falls in rainfall is just gone suddenly. Right. And we're already getting to that point here. This is actually getting fairly critical in the Comox Valley. The runoff scenarios are horrendous. We've all seen it. It starts to rain, rivers and creeks all fill up.
Right. Well, you were talking earlier about the example of the difference between Brooklyn Creek and Morrison Creek. So Morrison, you said, is still an intact
headwaters.
Headwaters. So you don't get flooding on that creek?
There's no flooding on that creek. It never oversubscribes its bank. Even last November 2010, when we had, in 2009, we had an incredible flood event. Flooding, they closed, Lewis Park was underwater, they closed all streets down, they even closed the 5th Street Bridge off. And Morrison Creek wasn't flooding. Brooklyn Creek in that same flood event was just spilling all over Guy Sims Farm. It was gushing through and over a culvert under Guthrie Road, eating away at banks and flooding huge areas there around residential.
Sorry, Jack, I need to cut you off here because we're running out of time on this. We will continue this because we're going to talk about the conservation strategy that the Land Trust has been involved in for several years. So thank you for your time. It's been very illuminating and always educational. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.